The landslide came without warning. Emma Matthews watched from her porch as the mountainside collapsed, cutting off the only road to her remote cabin. 8 months pregnant and completely alone, she had no choice but to seek shelter elsewhere. What she discovered hidden beneath thick forest roots changed everything. A metal hatch leading underground. The bunker below wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Warm air circulated through ventilation shafts. Lights hummed to life as she descended. Most disturbing were the baby supplies arranged neatly on a table, a clipboard bearing her name, and a heartbeat monitor pulsing rhythmically in the corner. Who could have known she would come here? What forces had orchestrated this impossible sanctuary? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early morning sunlight cast long shadows across Emma Matthews' cabin, illuminating dust particles that danced through the air like tiny galaxies. At 42, Emma moved with the deliberate grace of someone who had found peace in solitude. Her weathered hands smoothed the cotton fabric stretched tightly across her 8-month belly as she peered through the frost-edged window at the mountains beyond. "Another day, little one," she whispered, her breath forming a small cloud in the still, chilly morning air. "Just you and me and these old mountains." The cabin stood as a testament to Emma's determination. Solar panels gleamed on the south-facing roof. Rainwater collection systems lined the eaves, and a meticulously maintained garden, now dormant under winter's grip, awaited spring's return. Every nail, every board, every system had been installed by her hands over the past 3 years. Emma winced as the baby kicked forcefully against her ribs. She pressed a hand to the spot, feeling the small foot or elbow that protruded momentarily. "Scientist in training," she murmured with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Always testing boundaries." She pulled her worn leather journal from the shelf and opened to the next blank page, continuing her daily ritual. The previous pages were filled with precise handwriting, documenting barometric pressure changes, rainfall amounts, temperature fluctuations, data points that most would find mundane. But Emma saw patterns forming that concerned her deeply. Barometric pressure continuing downward trend. 7th consecutive day of abnormal readings, she wrote, her pen hesitating before adding, ground saturation levels critical after 3 weeks of unprecedented rainfall. Notified Regional Geological Survey again. No response. Her thoughts drifted back to the university laboratory where she had once led a team studying environmental prediction models. The sterile white walls, the endless meetings, the political compromises that diluted their findings. All of it seemed like another lifetime now. A life before tragedy had shown her the fragility of human connection. The cabin had been her escape and her salvation. When grief had threatened to consume her after David's death, these mountains offered sanctuary. When her parents and colleagues had questioned her sanity, the forest had accepted her without judgment. And when, 18 months ago, a brief relationship with a visiting environmental photographer had left her unexpectedly pregnant at 41, the solitude had given her space to embrace this new chapter without outside opinions or interference. Emma's hand moved instinctively to the small wooden box on her nightstand, her only remaining connection to her previous life. She didn't need to open it to know its contents. Faded photographs, academic credentials, the obituary clipping, and a handful of letters from Dr. Lillian Chen, the only colleague who still occasionally reached out. A distant rumble drew her attention back to the window. Dark clouds had begun gathering over the northern ridge, unusual for this time of year. Her scientific mind catalogued the abnormality, while her instincts sensed something more ominous. The baby shifted again, a rolling movement that momentarily took her breath away. "I know," she said softly. "Something feels different today." Emma checked her emergency supplies for the 100th time. Medical kit, preserved food, water purification, satellite phone with its frustratingly low battery. All the precautions of someone who understood that this remote existence carried risks, risks she had calculated and accepted, especially with a child on the way. She had planned to travel down to the small town 30 miles away next week for her final prenatal checkup with the rural clinic doctor. After that, she would be fully prepared to deliver her baby here. In this haven, she had created away from the chaos of a world that seemed increasingly unstable. Outside, the first heavy raindrops began to fall, drumming an irregular pattern on the metal roof. Emma added one final note to her journal. Mountain sounds different today. Animals gone quiet. She didn't write down the strange sensation creeping up her spine, the feeling of being watched that had intensified over recent weeks. Some things were too nebulous for scientific notation. The distant rumble came again, louder this time. Not thunder, she realized with sudden clarity. Something far more concerning. Emma closed her journal and moved toward the door. She needed to check the slope behind the cabin, the one she'd been monitoring with growing concern. The one the Geological Survey had dismissed as low risk in their automated email response. As her hand reached for the doorknob, she felt the first tremor beneath her feet. Emma braced herself against the doorframe as the tremor subsided, her heart pounding in her chest. When stillness returned, she stepped cautiously onto the porch, scanning the tree line for any visible damage. The forest appeared unchanged, but the air felt charged, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. She touched the silver locket that hung around her neck, a habit formed in childhood whenever anxiety surfaced. The cool metal against her fingertips provided a momentary anchor. Inside, she knew, was the last photograph taken of her family together. Before scientific disagreements had severed those bonds 15 years ago, Matthew's women always follow the evidence. No matter where it leads, her mother had told her when presenting the locket on Emma's graduation day. The inscription inside, "Truth finds its way," had seemed inspirational then. Now it felt like a warning. The satellite phone chimed from inside the cabin, its distinctive tone indicating a message rather than a call. Emma frowned. The only person who messaged her these days was Lillian, and only on their pre-arranged schedule. The message was brief. Satellite data shows concerning ground movement in your region. Please confirm safety. Emma's fingers hovered over the keypad. Dr. Lillian Chen had been her mentor, then colleague, then the only friend who hadn't drifted away after Emma's retreat from academia. Their communication was sparse but meaningful, Lillian respecting Emma's need for distance while maintaining a tenuous connection to her former life. Minor tremor felt. Monitoring situation. All preparations in place. Baby and I fine? She hesitated before adding, any news on those climate models we discussed? The response came surprisingly quickly. Models confirmed. Accelerating faster than anticipated. Committee still blocking publication. Call me when you can. Please. Emma deleted the message, her scientific mind already processing the implications. If Lillian's models were correct, and Emma's own observations supported the theory, the environmental changes weren't decades away, as the public was being told. They were imminent. This knowledge had been part of what drove her to the mountains, to establish a sustainable existence before the systems began failing. Not doomsday prepping, she'd told herself, just practical foresight based on data that few were willing to accept. The baby kicked again, a Morse code of movement against her ribs. Emma smiled despite her concerns. You'll know how to live in harmony with what's coming, she promised, rubbing her belly. Not fighting against it like they did. A flash of memory, her father's face reddening as he dismissed her research findings, her mother's silence that spoke volumes, the academic board that had politely suggested she was becoming too alarmist in her conclusions. David had been the only one who truly understood, who had helped her plan this sanctuary. Before the accident took him 3 years ago, Emma moved to the small desk where her laptop sat charging via the solar system. She checked the Geological Survey site one last time, finding the same automated response. No significant risk factors identified in your region. She closed the laptop with a frustrated snap. The baby's father, Jonathan, briefly crossed her mind. The environmental photographer had spent 2 weeks documenting the changing landscape around her cabin. Their connection had been unexpected but intense. When he'd left for his next assignment in the Arctic, neither had anticipated the consequence of their brief union. By the time Emma discovered her pregnancy, Jonathan was unreachable, his satellite phone silent. She'd made peace with that, preferring to raise her child alone rather than disrupt someone else's life path. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof in an accelerating rhythm. Emma moved methodically through the cabin, checking emergency supplies and securing loose items. The scientific part of her brain calculated probabilities and outcomes, while another part, the intuitive side she'd once dismissed but had learned to trust during her years in the wilderness, whispered that something fundamental was about to change. She found herself returning to the small wooden box on her nightstand. Inside lay the physical remnants of her former life, her parents' last letter expressing concern about her extreme isolation, newspaper clippings about David's accident, her credentials from the university, and a cryptic note from Lillian slipped to her at their last meeting. Some research continues in shadows. Be watchful. Emma closed the box and moved to the window. The first heavy droplets had given way to a torrential downpour. Water now cascaded down the slopes above her cabin in rivulets that grew larger by the minute. The mountain groaned again, a deep subterranean sound that seemed to come from its very core. The world came apart with a sound like the earth itself was tearing. Emma barely had time to brace herself against the kitchen counter before the first major tremor hit, sending dishes crashing to the floor. The lights flickered, then died as the solar system's safety protocols engaged. Emergency mode, Emma muttered, her training kicking in despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She moved with practiced efficiency toward the emergency kit by the door, one hand protectively cradling her belly. Through the window, she watched in horror as the far slope, the one she'd been monitoring for months, began to slide. It started slowly, almost gracefully, a few trees tilting at impossible angles. Then whole sections of earth slumping downward like a giant had taken a bite from the mountainside. Emma grabbed her topographical map from the wall, the one marked with her own notations about soil composition and drainage patterns. The same data she'd sent to the Geological Survey 3 times. The crack that now split the map seemed darkly symbolic. The roar grew deafening as the landslide gained momentum, consuming everything in its path. Emma stood transfixed, her scientific mind automatically calculating trajectory and impact, even as her heart raced with primal fear. When the sound finally subsided, she forced herself to assess the situation. Her cabin had survived, situated just far enough east of the slide's path. But the road, her only connection to civilization, was gone, buried under tons of mud, rock, and shattered trees. Emma flicked the emergency radio on, adjusting the frequency with trembling fingers. Static greeted her, broken occasionally by fragments of voices too distorted to understand. She tried each emergency channel methodically, her voice calm despite the circumstances. Mayday, mayday. Landslide at Carson Ridge, north face. Coordinates 45.7 degree N, 123.2 degree W. Pregnant woman isolated. Road access destroyed. Request emergency evacuation. She repeated the message 3 times on different frequencies before setting the radio to scan mode. The baby shifted restlessly, responding to her adrenaline. "It's okay," she whispered, though she knew it wasn't. She was due in 4 weeks. The medical supplies she'd cached would handle a normal delivery, but any complications would be potentially fatal without access to proper care. Emma pulled out the satellite phone, her last link to the outside world. The battery indicator showed just 18% remaining, enough for 1 call, maybe 2. She'd been conserving it for emergencies, planning to fully recharge during her clinic visit next week. She dialed Lillian's number, closing her eyes as it connected. 1 ring, 2, 3, then, "The number you have dialed is currently unavailable." "Please try," Emma ended the call, her mind racing. She tried the emergency services number next, but after 6 rings, the battery icon flashed red and the phone died with a plaintive beep. Alone, truly alone. She moved methodically through the cabin, cataloging resources. The water filtration system remained intact. Food stores would last 3 weeks if carefully rationed. Medical supplies were adequate for a textbook delivery. The solar system would reset once safety protocols cleared, restoring power. Basic survival was possible, but the landslide had changed everything. Even if her messages were received, emergency services would prioritize areas with multiple casualties. A single pregnant woman in a remote location would be low on their list, especially if they believed she had adequate supplies. Emma returned to the window, studying the transformed landscape. The slide had carved a new topography, creating an impassable ravine where the road once wound. To the west, the continuing rain swelled what had been a small stream into a churning river, cutting off another potential exit route. Her eyes turned to the eastern ridge, the one section of her property she'd rarely explored due to its dense vegetation and steep incline. If there was another way down the mountain, it would be there. As Emma gathered supplies for exploration, compass, remaining paper maps, canteen, emergency rations, she noticed something odd. The small wooden figurine that always sat on her windowsill had moved, now facing a different direction. She was certain she hadn't touched it. A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature crept up her spine. The sensation of being watched, which she'd dismissed for weeks as pregnancy paranoia, suddenly felt undeniably real. Emma grabbed her hunting knife, sliding it into her boot. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered that the landslide's timing was too perfect, too precise in its destruction of her only escape route. The radio continued to emit nothing but static as Emma prepared to venture into the unknown eastern woods, searching for a path to safety, or perhaps walking directly into whatever had been watching from the shadows all along. The eastern ridge proved more challenging than Emma had anticipated. Ancient trees with gnarled roots created natural barriers, while the recent rain had turned the ground treacherous. Twice she nearly lost her footing on the slick earth, her pregnant body's altered center of gravity working against her. 3 hours of careful navigation brought her to a rocky outcropping that offered a view of the valley below. Through her binoculars, Emma could see the extent of the landslide's destruction. A massive wound carved into the mountainside, with debris spread across what had once been the access road. No vehicles could possibly navigate that chaos for weeks, perhaps months. So much for emergency services, she murmured, lowering the binoculars. The baby shifted restlessly, prompting Emma to find a fallen log where she could rest. As she sat, catching her breath, she noticed something unusual about the ground beneath a nearby cluster of ferns. The vegetation pattern was too uniform, too deliberately arranged. Curiosity overcame caution. Emma moved closer, pushing aside the dense fronds. Beneath them, partially buried by years of forest debris, lay a rusted metal handle. "What on earth?" she whispered, dropping to her knees. Her fingers worked quickly, clearing away layers of compacted leaves and soil. The handle was attached to what appeared to be a hatch or door, its edges barely discernible beneath decades of natural camouflage. A distant memory surfaced, a rumor among university colleagues about abandoned research facilities from the Cold War era, scattered throughout remote wilderness areas. Most had been decommissioned and sealed in the 1990s, their exact locations redacted from public records. With growing excitement, Emma used a fallen branch to lever the handle upward. It resisted at first, then gave way with a metallic groan that echoed through the trees. Beneath was a narrow shaft with metal rungs leading downward into darkness. Emma hesitated, acutely aware of her vulnerable condition. Exploring unknown underground spaces while 8 months pregnant violated every safety protocol she'd established for herself. But with the road destroyed and no response on emergency channels, this discovery might represent her only viable shelter if weather conditions worsened. She retrieved a flashlight from her pack and directed its beam into the opening. The air wafting up from below wasn't stale as she'd expected, but surprisingly fresh, with an artificial quality that suggested ventilation systems. Active systems in an abandoned facility. She muttered, scientific curiosity overriding apprehension. Emma secured her pack and cautiously began her descent, testing each rung before committing her weight. The climb was awkward with her pregnant belly, but manageable. 20 feet down, her boots touched a solid concrete floor. The beam of her flashlight revealed a short corridor ending at a heavy metal door. Unlike the hatch above, this entrance showed no signs of neglect. Its surface was clean, its hinges recently oiled. A chill ran down Emma's spine that had nothing to do with the underground temperature. Someone had been maintaining this place. With growing unease, she approached the door. No locks were visible, just a simple lever handle. Emma hesitated, then pulled it downward. The door swung open with surprising ease. Beyond lay a scene that stopped her breath. Soft lighting automatically activated, revealing a facility that defied all expectations of an abandoned bunker. The air was warm and dry. Modern equipment hummed quietly along the walls. A central living area contained basic but comfortable furnishings. A bed, table, chairs, and what appeared to be a fully stocked kitchenette, but it was the far corner that caused Emma to stumble backward in shock. A medical area had been prepared with an obstetric examination table, monitoring equipment, and a clear acrylic bassinet. "This isn't possible," she whispered, her voice sounding strange in the artificial environment. On a nearby desk sat a clipboard with papers. Emma moved toward it, drawn by a terrible curiosity. At the top of the first page, she saw her own name typed in clinical font, Subject Matthews, Emma L. Her hands trembling now, Emma rifled through the papers, medical charts that matched her own prenatal history, detailed notes about her cabin's location, contingency plans that included controlled landslide protocols. A Polaroid slipped from between the pages, falling to the floor. Emma picked it up, staring at the faded image of a much younger version of herself, standing before what appeared to be a research facility entrance. She had no memory of this photograph being taken. Behind her, the heavy door swung shut with a definitive click. Emma whirled around, lunging for the handle, but too late. The locking mechanism had engaged. In the sudden silence, she became aware of a rhythmic sound emanating from the medical area. A heartbeat monitor pulsed steadily, its screen displaying two distinct heartbeats, hers and her unborn child's. Though she was connected to no sensors, the facility had been expecting her, had been prepared specifically for her, and now she was trapped inside. Emma pounded against the door until her fists ached, her initial panic giving way to methodical problem-solving. No handle existed on this side, no visible control panel, no emergency release. Whoever designed this place had intended it to be secure from the inside. "Think, Emma," she whispered, forcing herself to breathe deeply. "Observe before concluding." She turned back to survey her surroundings more carefully. The bunker was roughly 2,000 square feet, divided into distinct areas: living quarters, kitchenette, medical station, and what appeared to be a research workspace with monitors currently in sleep mode. The air circulation was excellent, no stuffiness despite being underground. Temperature comfortable at around 72 degrees. Lighting soft but adequate, mimicking natural daylight. This wasn't a prison cell, but rather a carefully designed habitat. Moving to the kitchenette, Emma opened cupboards to find them fully stocked with non-perishable foods. Not military rations, but high-quality preserved goods, organic even. She pulled out a can of peaches, examining the label. The expiration date was 3 years in the future. Her attention turned to a laminated chart magnetically attached to the refrigerator door. Emma's breath caught as she studied it. A daily meal rotation schedule, precisely calculated for optimal prenatal nutrition through each week of her 3rd trimester. It even accounted for her documented calcium deficiency, information from her medical records that only her former doctor should have. The refrigerator hummed softly as she opened it. revealing fresh produce, dairy and protein sources, all within their use-by dates. Whoever had prepared this place had done so recently, anticipating her arrival with unsettling precision. "This isn't random," Emma murmured, her scientific mind analyzing the evidence. "The landslide wasn't a natural event. It was engineered to drive me here." She moved to the medical area, examining the equipment with professional detachment despite her growing unease. Vital monitors, blood pressure cuffs, ultrasound machine, all hospital-grade and recently calibrated according to their maintenance tags. The acrylic bassinet contained newborn supplies, diapers, clothing, swaddling blankets. Emma lifted a tiny cap, soft and white, her fingers trembling slightly before setting it down. The monitoring equipment continued to track her vitals without physical connection, some technology beyond what she'd encountered in her scientific career. She waved her hand through the space between herself and the machines, searching for infrared sensors or other familiar technology, but found nothing obvious. At the workspace, she pressed a key to wake the computer. The screen illuminated to show a login prompt. Emma tried several common default passwords without success. A drawer beneath the desk yielded a manual with maintenance procedures for the facility's systems. She flipped through it, finding operational details for everything from the air filtration to the waste management systems. This place was designed for long-term habitation, completely self-contained, not just a temporary shelter, she realized. They expected me to deliver here, to stay here. The implication sent a chill through her body. She returned to the clipboard with her name, examining the papers more thoroughly. Most were filled with medical data tracking her pregnancy from conception. Impossible unless someone had been monitoring her for months. One notation caught her attention. Subject continues to follow predicted behavioral patterns. Isolation response within expected parameters. Emma's hands tightened on the clipboard. They've been watching me. Studying me. But why? She moved to a bookshelf containing medical texts and scientific journals. Among them was a volume on genetic adaptation to environmental stress, authored by Dr. Lillian Chen. "Lillian?" Emma whispered, pulling the book from the shelf with shaking hands. Inside the cover was a handwritten note. "The work continues. Forgive me." The baby kicked sharply, as if responding to her surge of emotion. Emma placed a protective hand over her belly. "I need to get out of here," she said with quiet determination. She began a systematic exploration of the walls, searching for hidden panels or secondary exits. Finding none, she returned to the door, examining its frame and hinges. Solid construction, no weaknesses. Outside, the storm intensified. Emma could hear rain drumming against the earth above, occasionally punctuated by the rumble of thunder. Even if she could escape, the conditions outside were deteriorating. For now, she was trapped. But being trapped with resources was better than being exposed to the elements in her condition. Temporary, she promised herself, moving to the kitchen to prepare a meal, despite her unease. "I'll play along until I understand what this place is. Who built it? What they want from me and my baby." She selected items from the food rotation schedule assigned for today's date, her scientific training compelling her to maintain her health while her mind worked on the problem of escape. As Emma ate, she couldn't shake the sensation of being observed, evaluated. Somewhere in this facility, there had to be active surveillance. And somewhere, someone was watching her adjustment to captivity with clinical interest. Sleep had been impossible. Despite the comfortable bed, Emma had spent most of the night cataloging every detail of her confinement, searching for weaknesses or clues. Morning arrived without sunlight, just a gradual brightening of the artificial illumination simulating dawn. Emma rose stiffly, her back aching from the pregnancy. As she moved to the kitchenette to prepare the breakfast indicated on the rotation schedule, she noticed something odd about the wall beside the refrigerator. The paint shade differed slightly, almost imperceptible unless viewed from this specific angle. Emma ran her fingers along the seam, feeling a subtle discontinuity. "False panel," she murmured. Scientific curiosity overriding caution, she pressed experimentally, then harder, feeling a slight give. With a soft click, a section of wall approximately 2 feet square recessed and slid aside, revealing a sophisticated control panel. Emma's breath caught. Multiple small monitors displayed different areas of the bunker, including the bed where she'd spent the restless night. One screen showed the forest above, focused on the hatch entrance. Another displayed what appeared to be her cabin. Now partially collapsed from the landslide's impact, "They've been watching everything," she whispered. Anger replacing fear. The largest monitor showed a simplified schematic of the bunker, revealing that what she'd explored was merely the upper level. Below, accessible through a sealed hatchway she hadn't yet discovered, lay additional chambers labeled with clinical designations: primary lab, long-term storage, and most disturbing, containment. In the corner of this screen, a digital timer counted down 28-14-33, 28-14-32, 28 days, 14 hours, 32 seconds. Almost exactly her expected time until delivery. Emma's hands moved quickly across the controls, seeking access to the system. Most functions required authorization codes, but basic camera manipulation responded to touch commands. She rotated exterior views, confirming the storm's intensity had increased overnight. The landslide damage was even more extensive than she'd feared. A soft beeping drew her attention to a smaller screen labeled Proximity Alert. A blinking dot moved slowly across a topographical display of the mountain. Someone approaching the area. Emma zoomed the exterior camera, heart racing. Through the rain and mist, a figure in dark weather gear picked carefully through the debris field. The image quality was poor, but she could make out scientific instruments in the figure's hands, measuring equipment, not rescue gear. "Not a rescue worker," Emma muttered. "They're assessing the landslide effectiveness." She watched as the figure methodically documented the destruction before turning toward her cabin. The camera angle shifted automatically to track their movement. Emma's mind raced. If she could trigger the exterior cameras, perhaps she could also activate some communication system. Her fingers flew across the panel, searching for communication controls. Instead, she accidentally activated an audio feed. A voice, distorted but recognizable, filled the bunker. Phase 1 successful. Subject secured in primary containment as scheduled. Monitoring systems show normal adaptation responses. Fetal development progressing according to projections. 28 days to extraction. Emma froze. The voice belonged to Dr. Lillian Chen. "Betrayed," she whispered, the word tasting bitter. The audio continued. "Maintaining observation distance as instructed. Will verify seismic charges are fully neutralized before departing. No evidence of external interest in the event. Classified as natural disaster as expected." Emma's scientific mind processed the implications while her emotions roiled. The landslide had been triggered deliberately. The timing, the perfect destruction of her escape routes, all engineered to drive her to this bunker without raising outside suspicion. "Extraction," she repeated, placing a protective hand over her belly. "Not rescue, extraction." She quickly closed the panel as the voice faded, not wanting to reveal her discovery. Whatever project continuation involved, her baby was clearly central to their plans. Emma returned to the main living area, mind working furiously. She needed more information before attempting escape. With the storm raging and Lillian's team monitoring the area, immediate departure would be futile. Instead, she began a more thorough search of the bunker. If there were hidden surveillance controls, there might be other concealed features, including the access to the lower levels shown on the schematic. The logical location would be beneath the medical area, where the monitoring equipment was concentrated. Emma moved the bassinet, running her hands along the floor. There, a slight variation in the concrete texture. A seam. She pressed experimentally and was rewarded with a faint mechanical sound, though no visible change occurred. A sequence, she realized. It needs a specific activation pattern. Emma glanced at the still active vital monitors tracking her and her baby. For now she would appear to comply while gathering intelligence. She would eat their food, use their facilities, even submit to their monitoring, all while searching for a way to access the lower levels and unlock the bunker's secrets. And when the storm cleared, when Lillian and her team believed her subdued and compliant, she would find a way to escape, or turn their surveillance equipment against them. 3 days of captivity had established a routine. Emma maintained the appearance of resigned acceptance, eating the prescribed meals, resting at scheduled times, and limiting her visible exploration to casual curiosity rather than determined investigation. All the while, her mind worked methodically, gathering and connecting fragments of information. The bunker's designers had been thorough in sanitizing the space of identifying details, but they hadn't anticipated a subject with Emma's particular expertise in research methodology. It was during her examination of the bookshelf, carefully selected texts on environmental collapse, genetic adaptation, and fetal development that Emma discovered the hidden compartment. A slight gap behind the lowest shelf revealed a document storage case. Secured with a combination lock, Emma glanced at the surveillance camera she'd located in the light fixture, then casually shifted position to block its view. The lock was standard, a 3-digit combination. She tried Lillian's office number from the University 3427 nothing. She tried the numerical representation of Chen 38514, still nothing. Emma closed her eyes, thinking of what might connect Lillian to this facility. A date, perhaps? She tried various significant dates from the shared academic history without success. Then, she remembered the book inscription. Work continues. The original environmental prediction model they developed together had been designated Project 538. She dialed. 538. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a single document, a research grant proposal with classified markings. Emma withdrew it carefully, angling away from the camera's field of view. The proposal's title sent a chill through her. Project Continuation. Phase 3, Transgenerational Adaptation Response in Controlled Isolation. Principal Investigator, Dr. Lillian Chen. Co-investigators, a list of redacted names with only partial letters visible. One ending with Thews. Emma's hand trembled. Her father's name was Matthews. She skimmed rapidly through dense scientific language that described a multi-decade research initiative, studying accelerated human adaptation to extreme environmental conditions. Key phrases jumped out: genetic markers for stress resilience, controlled isolation response, selective breeding protocols. The most disturbing section detailed the project's 3rd phase. Following successful initial generations, Phase 3, subjects demonstrate enhanced metabolic efficiency, advanced problem-solving under stress, and promising indicators of respiratory adaptation to degraded atmospheric conditions. Emma's scientific training battled with growing horror as she grasped the implications. This wasn't theoretical research. This was an active breeding program spanning generations. And somehow her family was involved. The final page contained a diagram showing genetic markers tracked across 3 generations of test subjects. The most recent entry was labeled Generation 3, Subject EM7, Emma. She was the 7th subject of the 3rd generation. A sound in the ventilation system startled her. Emma quickly returned the document to its case, hiding it in its compartment just as the main lights flickered. The bunker's systems were designed to create the illusion of day and night cycles. Evening was approaching, bringing dimmer lighting and slightly cooler temperatures. Emma had observed this pattern during her confinement, noting the precise 16-hour day followed by an 8-hour night, optimal circadian rhythms for prenatal development according to recent research. She moved to the kitchenette, preparing dinner according to the rotation schedule while her mind processed this new information. The pieces were starting to fit together: her isolated upbringing by scientist parents, her intuitive understanding of environmental systems, her inexplicable comfort in solitude. She hadn't chosen this life. She'd been conditioned for it, perhaps, genetically engineered for it, and her baby, the culmination of 3 generations of controlled genetic development, was the real target of Project Continuation. Emma placed a hand protectively over her belly, feeling the child shift in response to her touch. "They won't get you," she whispered. "I promise." As she ate the carefully balanced meal, Emma's eyes drifted to the medical area with its sophisticated monitoring equipment. The technology tracking her vital signs without physical contact. It wasn't beyond current science. It was beyond publicly acknowledged science. The implications were staggering. If this project had remained hidden for 3 generations, its backers must have extraordinary resources and influence. Emma set her plate aside, appetite gone. She needed to access the lower levels, to find concrete evidence of what they planned for her child. The hidden schematic had shown an access point beneath the medical area, requiring some activation sequence she hadn't yet discovered. She moved to the monitoring equipment, studying it with new purpose. These devices weren't just tracking her, they were collecting data. And where data was collected, access was needed. There had to be a maintenance mode, a calibration system, something that would require direct interface with the lower labs. Emma would find it, and when she did, she would discover exactly what they had planned and how to stop it. A week of captivity had sharpened Emma's observational skills. The bunker's systems operated on precise schedules, air filtration cycling every 4 hours, water purification tests at 0600 and 1800 hours, security protocols refreshing at midnight. Each cycle created brief fluctuations in power, microseconds where surveillance might falter. Emma had spent days memorizing these patterns while maintaining her facade of compliance. Tonight, she would make her move during the midnight security refresh. But first, she needed to address a more immediate concern. The baby had been unusually active for hours, a persistent discomfort in her lower right side, suggesting the child was pressing against a nerve. According to the pregnancy books on the shelf, this was normal at 33 weeks. But Emma's scientific mind wanted verification. The medical area contained an advanced ultrasound machine she'd been avoiding. Using it meant submitting to their monitoring, but her maternal instinct now overrode caution. Emma powered on the device, surprised when it initialized without requesting credentials. The interface was intuitive, designed for self-administration. She applied the gel to her abdomen and positioned the wand. The screen immediately displayed a perfect image of her child, clearer than any hospital ultrasound she'd experienced. The baby's features were distinct: a small nose, closed eyes, tiny fingers flexing. A healthy size for 33 weeks. "Hello there," Emma whispered, momentarily forgetting her circumstances in the wonder of seeing her child. What she noticed next sent ice through her veins. The screen split, displaying a side-by-side comparison. Her baby and what was labeled Subject RM5, Generation 3, Week 33. Measurements appeared, highlighting developmental variations. The machine wasn't just performing an ultrasound. It was conducting a comparative analysis against previous subjects. A notification appeared, automated analysis complete. "View full report?" Emma hesitated, then tapped yes. A comprehensive prenatal development log opened, documenting every aspect of her baby's growth compared to 5 other Generation 3 subjects. Most measurements aligned with normal parameters, but several were flagged with notations. Pulmonary development accelerated, 147% of baseline. Hemoglobin oxygen binding efficiency exceeding projections. Neurological response to maternal stress hormones within optimal range. These weren't standard medical observations. They were experimental benchmarks. Emma scrolled deeper into the data, finding genetic analysis that went far beyond normal prenatal screening. Specific gene sequences were highlighted with annotations like environmental resilience confirmed, and adaptation markers expressing as projected. Her baby wasn't just being monitored. It was being evaluated against predetermined genetic targets. What have they done to us? Emma whispered, hand trembling on her belly. The screen changed suddenly, displaying a new message. Development anomaly detected. Administering supplement protocol 37B. Please remain still. Before Emma could react, a panel opened in the wall beside the ultrasound machine. A mechanical arm extended, holding a hypodermic injection device. No! Emma jerked away, knocking the arm aside. The device clattered to the floor, its contents spilling across the concrete. Alarms blared. Red warning lights pulsed throughout the bunker. A computerized voice announced, "Protocol interruption. Subject intervention detected." Initiating containment procedures. The main door's locking mechanism engaged with additional metallic clicks. Ventilation grills sealed shut. The ultrasound machine retracted into the wall, panels sliding closed. Emma backed away, heart racing. She triggered some automated security protocol by rejecting the injection. "System override," announced the computerized voice. "Remote monitoring engaged." The main screen on the wall activated, displaying a live feed. Dr. Lillian Chen appeared, her face lined with concern and something else. Disappointment. "Emma," she said, her voice tinny through the speakers, "you need to allow the supplements. They're essential for the final developmental stage." "What have you done to my baby?" Emma demanded. Lillian's expression softened with what appeared to be genuine compassion. "Nothing harmful. We've simply helped evolution along. Your child represents humanity's best hope for survival in what's coming." "And what exactly is coming, Lillian? More of your manufactured disasters?" "Climate collapse isn't manufactured, Emma. You've seen the models yourself. Conventional adaptation would take thousands of years. Time humanity doesn't have." Lillian leaned closer to the camera. "Your family volunteered for this program. Your parents were pioneers." "Liar!" Emma shouted. "My parents were environmental scientists, not eugenicists." "They were both," Lillian replied calmly. "Your mother carried the first successfully modified embryo, you. They raised you in controlled isolation to stimulate the expression of specific genetic markers. Everything was carefully documented until their disagreement with the project's direction." Emma's world tilted. "What disagreement?" Lillian's image flickered as she hesitated. "That's not important now. What matters is completing what they started. Your child carries the culmination of 3 generations of genetic adaptation. The modifications are expressing perfectly." "Modifications," Emma repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "For survival," Lillian insisted. "Enhanced oxygen absorption, improved temperature regulation, optimized stress response. Humanity's next stage, accelerated by science rather than random chance." The screen went black suddenly, then returned to the prenatal development log. Emma stared at the comparative measurements, her scientific mind processing the implications while her heart rejected them entirely. Her baby had been engineered, and she herself was part of the experiment. Had been since conception. Emma couldn't sleep. Lillian's revelations had shattered what little remained of her understanding of her own life. She paced the bunker, mind racing through childhood memories, searching for signs she'd missed, her parents' insistence on living in remote locations, their detailed tracking of her development, their constant environmental testing, the carefully structured isolation that she had later replicated in her own life, believing it to be her choice. Had anything in her life been truly her own decision? Emma stopped pacing, a new thought crystallizing. If security had been heightened after her rejection of the injection protocol, the scheduled midnight systems refresh might create an even more noticeable fluctuation, possibly enough to access restricted functions. As midnight approached, Emma positioned herself at the computer workstation, watching the clock with focused intensity. At exactly Z00, the lights flickered momentarily. Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard, attempting various command overrides she'd used in research systems. The screen flashed, then displayed Administrative access granted. Emergency protocol. Time remaining. 90 seconds. Emma worked rapidly, navigating through file structures until she found personnel records. She searched for Matthews and found two entries, Matthews J. and Matthews Uder, her father and herself. She opened her father's file first, finding it heavily redacted but containing one accessible document labeled Ethics Committee Transcript Final Warning. Emma opened it, eyes scanning the text as precious seconds ticked away. Committee meeting 342. Project continuation present. Chen L. Chair. Dawson K. Fujita S. Matthews J. Rodriguez M. Names redacted. Chen. The Phase 2 results exceed all projections. Subjects show 43% improvement in oxygen utilization and 27% enhanced thermal regulation. We are approaching viable adaptation thresholds. Matthews. At what cost? The embryonic modifications are becoming more aggressive with each generation. We're no longer enhancing existing traits. We're creating new ones. This crosses the line from adaptation to engineering. Chen. The distinction is academic. The climate models show atmospheric degradation accelerating. Without these modifications, humanity cannot survive what's coming. Matthews. Then we should be focusing on environmental solutions, not changing humans to survive a ruined planet. Rodriguez. The ethical concerns about consent remain unaddressed. The Phase 3 subjects will be born with modifications they never agreed to. Chen. They wouldn't exist without our intervention. Their very existence is predicated on the project. Matthews. My daughter believes she's made her own choices. She deserves to know the truth before her child becomes the next experiment. Chen. Your attachment is clouding your scientific judgment. Emma's isolation response has been optimal precisely because she believes her choices are autonomous. Telling her now would compromise decades of work. Matthews. I won't continue without her informed consent. Marion agrees with me. Chen. Your wife's concerns have been noted, but the committee has voted. Phase 3 continues as planned. Matthews. Then we resign from the project effective immediately. And we're taking our daughter out. Chen. That's not possible. The security implications alone. Remainder of transcript redacted. The screen flashed red. Administrative access terminating in 10 seconds. Emma quickly searched for her own file, opening it just as the countdown reached 3. She glimpsed one entry, subject status active. Location containment alpha, extraction date, followed by her due date, before the system locked her out. She sat back, mind reeling. Her father had tried to protect her. Both her parents had. They'd attempted to remove her from the project, and something had happened to them afterward. Emma moved to the kitchen area, pulling open drawers until she found a small prying tool for removing vent covers. If the transcript was accurate, her parents had turned against the project shortly before their supposed deaths in what she'd been told was a laboratory accident. Not an accident, a consequence. With grim determination, Emma returned to the medical area, where she'd previously identified a potential access point to the lower levels. Using the tool, she carefully worked at the seam in the flooring, revealing a recessed panel with a numerical keypad. What code would her father have used? What would he expect her to try? Emma thought of her childhood, of the repeated lessons her father had instilled, scientific integrity, ethical responsibility, human dignity. On impulse, she entered her birth date, 05-2282. The panel remained locked. She tried her full birth. Year 05-22-1982. Nothing. Then she remembered her father's favorite ethical principle, one he'd quoted often: knowledge without conscience is the ruin of the soul. Rabelais, 1532. Emma entered 1532. The panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage with a ladder leading downward. He left me a way in, she whispered. A faint sound emanated from below, mechanical, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Emma hesitated, glancing at the surveillance camera. If she descended, they would know immediately. Whatever lay below, there would be no pretending she hadn't seen it. The baby kicked, as if offering an opinion. "You're right," Emma said softly. "Some truths need to be faced directly." She lowered herself carefully onto the ladder, pregnancy making the descent awkward but manageable. The panel remained open above her, her father's final gift, perhaps. A way to learn the truth he died trying to reveal. As Emma descended into the facility's secrets, one thought sustained her. Her parents had rebelled against this project. Whatever she discovered below, she wasn't alone in her resistance. She was continuing their fight. The ladder descended 30 feet into darkness before Emma's feet touched solid ground. Emergency lighting activated automatically, casting an eerie blue glow through what appeared to be an advanced laboratory space easily 3 times the size of the upper living quarters. Unlike the carefully maintained living area above, this lower section showed signs of hasty abandonment, papers scattered across workstations, equipment in standby mode, chair positions suggesting their occupants had left mid-task. "They evacuated," Emma murmured, moving cautiously through the space. But when? And why? The laboratory contained multiple specialized workstations, genetic sequencing equipment, environmental simulation chambers, and most disturbing, what appeared to be a medical procedure area with restraints. Emma approached the central computer terminal, its screen displaying a login prompt. She tried her father's ethics code, 1532, but access was denied. Moving methodically through the lab, she examined papers and notes, most containing technical data she recognized from her own environmental research, but applied to genetic adaptation rather than external solutions. A dusty desk drawer yielded something unexpected, a personnel identification badge. Emma wiped away the grime, then stared in shock at the image. The woman in the photograph could have been Emma herself, but with subtle differences, slightly sharper cheekbones, darker eyes, hair styled differently. The name printed beneath sent a tremor through her body. Dr. Eleanor Matthews, Research Director, Project Continuation, not Emma Matthews. Eleanor Matthews. She wasn't named after her grandmother, as she'd always been told. She was named after herself. Emma staggered back, leaning against a workstation for support. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about genetic modification. It was something far more profound. Her eyes caught a terminal still in standby mode rather than fully powered down. She moved to it, finding it logged into an active session under E. Matthews. Someone had left in such haste they hadn't even closed their work. The screen displayed research notes dated 30 years earlier, when Emma would have been just a child. Cloning protocol refinement successful. Subject EM1 through EM6 non-viable beyond initial cellular division. Subject EM7 has reached embryonic stability with enhanced adaptation markers successfully integrated. Transfer to surrogate scheduled for 05/22, Emma's birth date. Except it wasn't marking a birth, it was marking a transfer. She wasn't just genetically modified. She was a clone of this Eleanor Matthews, enhanced with additional genetic adaptations. The room seemed to spin around her. Emma grabbed the edge of the desk, forcing herself to breathe deeply. Her scientific mind parsed the information, while her emotional self reeled from the revelation. A soft sound from deeper in the laboratory snapped her back to awareness. She wasn't alone down here. Emma moved cautiously toward the noise, passing through a decontamination chamber into what the signage identified as long-term storage. The temperature dropped noticeably, her breath fogging in the chilled air. The sound came again, a mechanical cycling, like a refrigeration system maintaining precise temperatures. The room contained a series of cylindrical tanks, each connected to monitoring equipment and life support systems. Emma approached the nearest tank, wiping condensation from its small viewing window. Empty. She moved to the next. Also empty. The third tank contained a murky fluid obscuring its contents. Emma located the information terminal beside it and activated the display. Subject RM5, Generation 3. Status: non-viable. Genetic degradation at 12 weeks gestation. Preserved for analysis, a preserved fetus. One of the failed attempts before her own baby. Emma continued through the room, finding 3 more tanks with similar contents and descriptions. Failed experiments. Her child's predecessors. At the far end of the chamber stood one tank larger than the others, its systems more advanced, the monitoring equipment actively displaying vital signs. Unlike the preservation tanks, this one was clearly designed for suspended animation. Emma hesitated before approaching, some part of her already knowing what or who she would find. The viewing panel showed a woman floating in clear fluid, eyes closed, appearing to be in her 60s, though it was difficult to determine age accurately. Tubes and sensors connected to her body, monitoring and maintaining critical functions. The nameplate confirmed Emma's suspicion. Dr. Eleanor Matthews, Project Director. Status: suspended animation, Phase 4 pending. Emma pressed her palm against the cold glass, staring at her own face, aged 30 years. The original Eleanor Matthews, her genetic source, was still alive, preserved in this technological limbo. A sudden thought struck her with physical force. If Eleanor Matthews was here, then who were the people Emma had known as her parents? The ones who had raised her, who had apparently turned against the project to protect her. And more urgently, what was Phase 4, and why was Eleanor Matthews being preserved for it? The facility's alarm system activated with a piercing wail. Above, Emma could hear the heavy mechanism of the primary door engaging. They knew she had discovered the truth. The alarms continued their piercing wail as Emma frantically searched for a way to secure the laboratory. Finding no obvious controls, she retreated to the ladder, climbing as quickly as her pregnant body allowed, emerging into the upper level. She found the main door's locking mechanism engaged in what appeared to be an override sequence. Someone was coming in. Emma rushed to the hidden security panel, forcing it open. The displays showed a team assembling outside the bunker entrance, hazmat-suited figures with equipment she couldn't identify. She estimated she had minutes, perhaps less. Turning back to the laboratory entrance, Emma searched for a way to seal it. There, a manual override switch labeled Containment Protocol. She activated it, watching as the floor panel slid back into place with a pneumatic hiss. Whatever lay below would remain her secret a little longer. The main terminal suddenly activated, Lillian Chen's face appearing on screen. Emma, please remain calm. The lower levels are not safe. They've been in stasis for nearly 30 years, for good reason. What you've seen requires context. Context? Emma's voice rose. I'm a clone of your research director. What possible context makes that acceptable? Lillian's expression flickered with something like remorse. Eleanor Matthews was brilliant. The only one who truly understood what would be required for human adaptation to succeed. When she realized conventional genetic modification wouldn't be sufficient, she volunteered her own DNA for the next phase. And the people I knew as my parents. James and Marion were Eleanor's most trusted colleagues. They volunteered to raise you when it became clear Eleanor wouldn't live to see the project's completion. They were supposed to prepare you gradually for the truth. Instead, they tried to protect me from it, Emma countered. They tried to take me out of the project, Lillian nodded sadly. They became too attached, confused their role as guardians with being actual parents. They couldn't separate their emotional connection from the scientific necessity. So you had them killed, Emma said flatly. No, Lillian appeared genuinely shocked. Their deaths were truly an accident. A lab explosion during their unauthorized attempt to destroy research data. We never intended... The screen flickered as someone handed Lillian a document off camera. Her expression changed as she read it, eyes widening slightly. Emma, my team is coming in to transfer you to a more appropriate facility. Please don't resist. It's important for your health and your baby's safety. The transmission ended abruptly. Emma moved quickly to the desk where she'd earlier found hidden compartments. There had to be more. James and Marion wouldn't have left her without means to understand what was happening. She ran her fingers along the underside of the desk, finding a small recess. Pressing it, released a hidden drawer containing a sealed envelope yellowed with age. Inside was a birth certificate, not the one she'd seen all her life, but an original document dated 30 years earlier than she'd believed. It listed Eleanor Matthews as both genetic source and subject designate, with Dr. Marion and James Matthews identified as project guardians. A handwritten note was paper-clipped to the certificate, the handwriting matching what Emma recognized as her father's, James's, distinctive script. "Emma, if you're reading this, we failed to get you out. I pray that's not the case, but we've prepared for all possibilities. You need to know the truth. You were born in the original Phoenix facility. Eleanor created you as her genetic successor, but you are your own person. The choices you've made, including your isolation, were influenced by genetic memory, not just conditioning. The cabin location wasn't random. You were drawn there. When your child is born, they will complete the adaptation sequence, but not for the purpose the project intends. Eleanor discovered something the others don't know. The modification sequence contains a fail-safe, a genetic lock that only activates with the third generation. It doesn't enhance survival in a degraded world. It enables restoration of the natural world. Your child carries the key to environmental regeneration, not just human adaptation. That's why they're so determined to control the birth. The bunker you're in has another exit. Look for the mountain symbol on the north wall of the storage room. The key code is the date we took you from the facility, 09/1786. There are others waiting to help you, others who broke free from the project. Find them, trust them. We love you, not as guardians, but as the only parents you've ever needed. The main bunker door's locking mechanism disengaged with a heavy thunk. They were coming in. Emma folded the note and birth certificate, tucking them into her pocket. North wall. Mountain symbol. 09/1786. She had seconds to decide. Confront Lillian and her team directly, or find the hidden exit and escape with the truth. The baby kicked sharply, as if casting a vote. "Right," Emma whispered. "Time to finish what they started." Emma moved swiftly to the storage room as the main door began its opening sequence. The north wall appeared solid, shelving units filled with supplies and equipment, obscuring any potential exit. Her eyes scanned desperately for a mountain symbol. There, almost invisible unless you were looking for it specifically, a small triangular marking etched into the metal frame of the lowest shelf. Emma dropped to her knees, pressing the area around the symbol. Nothing happened. The keypad. It needed the code, but there was no visible input device. Emma ran her fingers along the shelf edge, finding a small sliding panel. Behind it lay a numeric touchpad. She entered the date, 09/1786. The entire shelving unit slid silently sideways, revealing a narrow passage carved directly into the mountain rock. Emergency lighting activated automatically, illuminating a rough tunnel that sloped gently upward. From the main room, she heard voices. Lillian's team had entered the bunker. Emma slipped into the passage, finding a manual control to close the hidden door behind her. It sealed with barely a sound, the shelving unit sliding back into place on the other side. The passage was cool and damp, clearly natural in origin, but modified with reinforced sections and basic lighting. Emma moved as quickly as she dared, one hand protectively over her belly, the other tracing the rough wall for support. After several minutes of steady climbing, the passage branched. No markings indicated which way to go, and neither direction showed signs of recent use. Emma hesitated, her scientific mind calculating probabilities. The left branch continued upward, logically the route to the surface. But if the project had built this escape route, they might anticipate her taking the most obvious path. As she deliberated, her foot struck something that rolled across the stone floor. Emma retrieved it, a small cylindrical device resembling a compass, but with unusual markings around its face. Rather than cardinal directions, it displayed a series of concentric circles with a single indicator needle. The needle vibrated slightly. Pulling toward the right passage, Emma studied the device. recognizing its sophisticated design despite its weathered appearance. This was no ordinary compass. It was responding to something specific, perhaps electromagnetic signatures in the mountain's geology. "Another gift from James and Marion," she murmured, deciding to trust the device. The right passage descended slightly before leveling out. The compass needle remained steady, guiding Emma through 2 more junctions where she might otherwise have become lost in the mountain's labyrinth. After 20 minutes of careful progress, the passage widened into a small chamber containing basic supplies: water, preserved food, weather-appropriate clothing, a first aid kit. Someone had prepared this place as a way station. Among the supplies, Emma found a sealed plastic container holding documents, topographical maps of the surrounding mountains, marked with routes and locations labeled only with initials, plus a handwritten journal. The journal's first page bore an inscription: "For EM, if you're reading this, you've chosen freedom over conditioning. The compass will guide you to safety, but trust your instincts above all else." Some patterns run deeper than programming. Marion Matthews, her mother, not her biological source, but the woman who had raised and loved her, who had ultimately given her life trying to protect Emma from the project. Emma flipped through the journal, finding detailed observations of her childhood development, noting behaviors that matched Eleanor's alongside deviations that were uniquely her own. Marion had documented Emma's growing independence, her natural affinity for environmental science, her intuitive understanding of ecological systems, all with obvious pride. The final entry, dated just days before the laboratory accident, read, "James and I have decided we cannot allow the project to continue using her as an unwitting vessel. Eleanor's original vision has been corrupted. The adaptation sequence was meant to heal, not merely survive in a broken world. Emma deserves to choose her own path, and her child deserves to fulfill its true purpose. Tomorrow we destroy the data and take her away from all of this. May she forgive us someday for the truths we kept from her." A video device sat beside the journal. Emma activated it with trembling fingers. The screen flickered to life, showing a younger Marion and James Matthews seated together in what appeared to be this very chamber. "Emma," Marion began, her voice thick with emotion, "if you're watching this, then our plan to extract you from the project failed. But you've found your way to the truth nonetheless." She smiled sadly. "You always were brilliantly stubborn." James leaned forward. "There isn't much time, so listen carefully. What Lillian and the others believe about the adaptation sequence is only partially correct. Eleanor encoded a secondary purpose into the genetic modifications. The recording abruptly cut off, damaged, or deliberately interrupted." Emma stared at the blank screen, processing this new information. Eleanor Matthews, her genetic source, had embedded something in the modification sequence that even the project leaders didn't understand. Something that would activate with the 3rd generation, her baby. The compass needle suddenly swung violently, pointing toward the chamber's far wall, where another passage continued deeper into the mountain. The device was reacting to something, or someone, approaching. Emma gathered the essential supplies, securing the compass and journal inside her clothing. Whoever was coming, they had triggered the device's proximity alert. Friend or foe, she couldn't afford to wait and find out. She moved swiftly into the continuing passage, following the compass needle that now steadied on a new heading, one that would hopefully lead to the answers her parents had died trying to provide. The tunnel system wound through the mountain like an arteries, occasionally branching into chambers that showed signs of past habitation, abandoned research equipment, basic living supplies, hastily evacuated workspaces. Emma followed the compass's unwavering guidance, moving steadily upward toward what she hoped was the surface. Her water broke 3 hours into the journey. The first contraction seized her with unexpected intensity, forcing Emma to brace against the rough stone wall. Too early. 3 weeks before her due date, The stress and physical exertion had triggered labor. "Not now," she whispered, hands cradling her belly. "Not here," but her body had other plans. The contractions, though still widely spaced, were unmistakable. Emma had studied enough obstetrics to recognize early labor. She had hours yet. First pregnancies typically progressed slowly, but she needed to find safety before active labor began. The compass needle wavered, then stabilized toward a narrow side passage Emma might have otherwise missed. Trusting the device, she followed it into a chamber unlike the others she'd encountered. This space was carefully maintained, free of dust and decay. Modern equipment hummed quietly along the walls. Atmospheric processors, water purification systems, and most surprisingly, living plants growing under specialized lighting. This wasn't an abandoned outpost. It was actively used. At the center stood a circular platform surrounded by projection equipment. Emma approached cautiously, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding labor discomfort. The platform activated at her proximity, illuminating with a holographic display of Earth's climate systems. A simulation model, far more sophisticated than anything she'd worked with in her academic career. Data flowed across projected atmospheric layers, oceanic currents and geological formations, all interconnected in a complex dance of planetary systems. The model showed an accelerating collapse, rising temperatures, acidifying oceans, destabilizing weather patterns. A timeline indicator at the base suggested irreversible tipping points were mere decades away, far sooner than publicly acknowledged. "It's worse than they told us," Emma murmured, recognizing the patterns from her own research, but at a scale and detail level she'd never had access to. Another contraction gripped her, stronger than the last. Emma breathed through it methodically, counting seconds. 7 minutes since the previous one, still early but progressing. As the contraction eased, she noticed a small control panel beside the platform with a single unlabeled button. Emma pressed it, watching as the holographic Earth split into two parallel projections, the collapsing system continuing on the left, while a new simulation formed on the right. This second Earth began with identical degradation patterns, but then displayed something remarkable: points of biological intervention appearing across critical ecosystems. The indicators weren't technological. They were organic in nature, spreading through soil, water, and eventually atmospheric systems. The simulation showed planetary healing, initiated by some form of biological catalyst, a genetic catalyst. "The adaptation sequence," Emma whispered in sudden understanding. "It's not just for human survival, it's for planetary restoration." The implications were staggering. Eleanor Matthews hadn't engineered a human subspecies to survive in a ruined world. She'd created the means to heal the world itself. But the process required something from the third-generation subject, Emma's baby, to activate. A third contraction came, intense enough to momentarily blur Emma's vision. 5 minutes since the last. Labor was accelerating. A sound from the chamber entrance snapped her attention back to immediate dangers. Someone was coming. Emma quickly scanned the room for exits or hiding places. A narrow alcove behind one of the plant-growing systems offered minimal concealment. She squeezed into the space just as footsteps entered the chamber. Through a gap in the vegetation, Emma watched as a figure in worn outdoor gear approached the projection platform. The person, a woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair, studied the dual projections with evident familiarity. "I know you're here, Emma," the woman said without turning. "The system logs every activation. And besides," she glanced toward the alcove with penetrating eyes, "your contractions are registering on the environmental sensors." Emma remained silent, one hand instinctively reaching for the small utility knife she'd taken from the supplies. "You don't need that," the woman said, gesturing to Emma's hidden weapon. "I was a friend of Marion's, one of the originals who broke away from the project when it became clear Lillian was corrupting Eleanor's vision." She turned fully toward Emma's hiding place. "My name is Dr. Sofia Rodriguez. You saw my name in the Ethics Committee transcript." I tried to support your parents when they wanted to take you out. She extended empty hands in a gesture of peace. And right now, I'm probably the only person within 50 miles qualified to deliver your baby safely. Another contraction seized Emma, stronger than any previous. She gasped involuntarily, revealing her position. That was 4 minutes from the last one, Rodriguez observed calmly. You're progressing quickly for a first birth. Likely the stress response activating adaptive functions. We need to move you to proper facilities before transition phase. Emma emerged cautiously from her hiding place, compass held tight in one hand, knife in the other. Why should I trust you? Rodriguez's expression softened. Because Marion trusted me with this. She held up an identical compass to Emma's. We don't have much time, Dr. Rodriguez said, supporting Emma through another contraction as they navigated a hidden elevator disguised as part of the mountain rock face. Lillian will have deployed teams throughout the tunnel system by now. Emma gripped the handrail, breathing rhythmically as the pain intensified, then gradually subsided. 3 minutes apart, she gasped. Progressing faster than standard protocols would predict. Rodriguez nodded. The adaptive genes accelerate physiological processes under stress. Your body is optimizing for rapid delivery. The elevator ascended smoothly, opening into a concealed facility built into the mountainside, its windows cleverly disguised as rock formations from outside. Solar panels that mimicked natural stone captured energy while remaining invisible to aerial surveillance. Welcome to Sanctuary 7, Rodriguez said, guiding Emma toward a well-equipped medical area, one of 13 independent sites established by Project Effectors. Marion helped design this one specifically for you. The medical suite contained state-of-the-art birthing equipment arranged for maximum efficiency. Rodriguez helped Emma onto the birthing bed, quickly connecting monitoring equipment that displayed both standard vital signs and specialized readings labeled adaptive function and genetic expression. I need to know what happens when my baby is born, Emma said between controlled breaths. What exactly did Eleanor encode in our genetics? Rodriguez hesitated, then reached into a locked cabinet. She withdrew what appeared to be a delicate crown made of interwoven metallic filaments and crystal nodes. The device hummed faintly when activated, small lights pulsing in complex patterns along its circumference. This is what the project has been searching for, Rodriguez explained. Eleanor's final invention, a neural interface designed to capture and record the unique brainwave patterns generated during the birth of a third-generation adaptive child. Emma eyed the device warily. A brain scanner? Much more sophisticated, Rodriguez replied, setting it carefully on a specialized stand. It doesn't just passively record. It actively maps the neurological activation sequence that triggers the adaptive cascade. The moment your child is born, their brain will generate a specific pattern, a genetic key that unlocks dormant functions in the adaptive sequence. Another contraction seized Emma, more powerful than before. She gripped the bed rails, focusing through the pain. The transition is beginning, Rodriguez observed, checking the monitors. Full dilation will follow quickly. When the contraction passed, Emma fixed Rodriguez with an intense gaze. You still haven't explained what actually happens when this key is activated. Rodriguez's expression turned solemn. Because we don't know precisely. Eleanor's records were incomplete, deliberately so. She fragmented the information to prevent anyone from controlling the entire process. She gestured to the neural interface. This device is meant to receive and transmit the activation pattern to special receiver stations positioned at critical environmental points worldwide. Transmit how? Emma demanded, suspicion returning despite her vulnerable position. Before Rodriguez could answer, a communication panel on the wall activated. A man's face appeared, features tense with urgency. Sophia, we have incoming. Multiple vehicles approaching from the South Access Road. Thermal signatures indicate at least 12 personnel with advanced equipment. Lillian, Rodriguez confirmed grimly. Sooner than I expected. She turned to the screen. Initiate Protocol Obsidian. Full blackout in 3 minutes. Confirmed. 3 minutes to blackout. The communication ended as Emma experienced her strongest contraction yet. A primal sound escaping her throat. 2 minutes apart, Rodriguez noted, quickly gathering additional supplies. We need to move you to the secure delivery room. She hesitated, then added, Emma, you need to decide about the neural interface. Once your baby is born, we'll have only moments to capture the activation pattern before it dissipates. Emma's scientific mind raced despite the pain. The device could be exactly what Rodriguez claimed, the key to activating Eleanor's environmental restoration sequence. Or it could be something more sinister, a means of controlling her child for purposes she didn't yet understand. Why did Eleanor fragment the information? She asked, struggling to maintain clarity through mounting labor pain. To prevent misuse, Rodriguez replied, helping Emma to her feet. The adaptation sequence could be weaponized if someone understood its complete mechanism. She trusted that her genetic successors, you and your child, would instinctively know the right choice when the moment came. The facility lights dimmed briefly as security protocols engaged. In the distance, Emma could hear mechanical systems powering down as the blackout protocol minimized detectable energy signatures. Lillian doesn't have a neural interface, Rodriguez added urgently. That's why she needs your baby, to extract the activation pattern directly. With Eleanor's device, we can capture the pattern without invasive procedures. Another powerful contraction doubled Emma over. When it passed, she fixed Rodriguez with a penetrating stare. You said, we'll have only moments. You're planning to be present for the birth? Rodriguez met her gaze steadily. Someone needs to operate the interface. It requires precise calibration to capture the pattern correctly. A final security alarm sounded. 1 minute to complete blackout. The distant sound of helicopter rotors cut through the mountain air. Emma made her decision. Get me to the secure room. But the interface stays with me. Nobody uses it without my explicit consent, Rodriguez nodded, helping Emma toward a reinforced door as the facility prepared for imminent incursion. Your mother would be proud, she said softly. Marion always said you'd make your own choices when it mattered most. The secure delivery room was a windowless chamber at Sanctuary 7's core, designed to function completely off-grid. As the facility entered full blackout, emergency lighting bathed the space in a soft amber glow. Rodriguez worked efficiently, arranging medical equipment while monitoring Emma's rapidly progressing labor. 90 seconds between contractions, Rodriguez observed. Transition phase is nearly complete. Emma gripped the birthing bar above the specialized bed, her scientific detachment eroded by waves of pain. Where is the neural interface? She managed between contractions. Secure, Rodriguez assured her, nodding toward a sealed case beside the monitoring equipment. But we should prepare it now. Once crowning begins, events will accelerate quickly. A sudden impact shuddered through the facility, distant but powerful enough to vibrate the reinforced walls. Rodriguez glanced anxiously at the security monitor. They've breached the outer perimeter, she reported. The diversion protocol should buy us some time, but not enough, Emma finished grimly. Another contraction seized her, more powerful than any before. Emma focused her awareness inward, synchronizing with the primal rhythms of her body. The adaptive genes weren't just accelerating labor, they were optimizing it, minimizing unnecessary pain while maximizing efficiency. When the contraction subsided, Emma noticed Rodriguez preparing an emergency delivery kit. Something about its design caught her attention. The case appeared older than the other equipment, its surface weathered by time. That kit, Emma said, breathing heavily. It's not standard issue, Rodriguez paused, then nodded. Marion prepared it. Years ago, when they first realized you might someday need to deliver under emergency conditions. She opened the case, revealing meticulously organized medical supplies alongside something unexpected. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age. With "For Emma" written in Marion's familiar handwriting, Emma reached for it between contractions, fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, the paper delicate with time. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, you're about to bring the next generation into the world under circumstances far from what we hoped. I pray you're not alone, that you found allies among those of us who broke away from what the project became. There isn't time for the full story, so I'll share only what you must know now. Project Continuation began with noble intentions, Eleanor's vision of human adaptation to survive climate collapse. But she discovered something none of us anticipated. The modification sequence created a form of genetic resonance that could amplify and transmit across biological systems. When Eleanor realized the full implications, that the sequence could potentially restore environmental balance rather than just help humans survive its collapse, she kept this discovery secret from all but her closest confidants. Your father and I were among them. The third generation, your child, is the catalyst. Their brain will generate a unique neurological pattern at birth that can activate dormant restoration sequences embedded in the modifications. Once activated and transmitted via Eleanor's interface, these sequences can spread through natural systems, effectively reprogramming damaged ecosystems toward recovery. But Lillian and her faction believe the sequence should be controlled, deployed selectively to benefit those they deem worthy of survival. They fear widespread environmental restoration would undermine the power structures they've built in anticipation of collapse. Trust your instincts. Emma, the adaptive genes carry more than physical traits. They carry Eleanor's wisdom, her understanding of how life systems interconnect. Your child will know what to do when the moment comes. The activation requires two elements, the neural pattern captured by Eleanor's interface and a conscious choice by the third-generation carrier, your baby, facilitated through your genetic bond. This dual-key system was Eleanor's safeguard against misuse. Know that we loved you from the moment we first held you, not as a subject, but as our daughter. Whatever choices you make now, we are proud of the woman you've become. With all my love, Marion. Mom. Emma folded the letter as another contraction began, this one bringing an overwhelming urge to push. Rodriguez recognized the signs immediately. Crowning has begun, she announced, positioning herself. Utaito berdim mananpato. The child is coming now. The distant sounds of intrusion grew louder, shouts and the metallic clang of forced entry. The sanctuary's defenses were failing faster than anticipated. No time for the interface, Rodriguez said urgently, reaching for the sealed case. Wait, Emma gasped between pushes. Marion's letter. The activation needs both the neural pattern and my baby's choice. A dual-key system. Rodriguez paused, confusion crossing her features. Choice. But how can a newborn choose? Emma's scientific mind connected the fragments even as her body worked to bring her child into the world. Genetic resonance, facilitated through our bond, understanding dawned. The neural interface wasn't just a passive recording device, it was a bridge between mother and child, a means of communication at the most fundamental biological level. I need to be wearing the interface, Emma realized. Not just the baby. Rodriguez hesitated only briefly before retrieving the delicate crown-like device. This wasn't in any of Eleanor's documentation we recovered, because she knew Lillian would expect the interface to be used on the baby alone. Emma managed before another powerful contraction demanded her complete attention. Marion said to trust my instincts. A final thunderous crash indicated the inner defenses had been breached. They had minutes at most. Rodriguez carefully placed the neural interface on Emma's head, the delicate filaments adjusting automatically to create contact points. Push when you're ready, she instructed calmly, despite the approaching danger. Your body knows what to do. Emma closed her eyes, surrendering to the ancient process as the adaptive genetics optimized her delivery. Through the interface, she felt something extraordinary. A presence reaching toward her consciousness as her child prepared to enter the world. Not just her child. Eleanor's legacy, Marion's hope, and possibly, if the adaptation sequence worked as intended, the key to healing a broken planet. The neural interface hummed with increasing intensity as Emma's final pushes brought her child closer to birth. Through the device, she experienced something beyond physical sensation, a connection to patterns flowing through her modified genetics. Dormant sequences awaiting activation. "I can see the head," Rodriguez reported, her professional calm belied by the tension in her voice. One more push, the facility's security alarm blared a final warning. Intruders had reached their level. The reinforced door to the delivery room would hold briefly, but not long enough. Emma focused inward, gathering her remaining strength for the final effort. As the contraction built, she surrendered to it completely, pushing with primal determination. A moment of intense pressure, then sudden release. "It's a girl," Rodriguez announced, quickly clearing the newborn's airways. The infant's first cry rang out, strong, vibrant, as Rodriguez placed the tiny form on Emma's chest. The moment of contact triggered something extraordinary within the neural interface. The device's lights accelerated their pulsing pattern, creating complex geometric formations around mother and child. Through the interface, Emma sensed her daughter's consciousness, not with thoughts or words, but with raw awareness, emotional connection, genetic recognition. Two modified genomes communicating at a fundamental level beyond ordinary human experience. "The pattern is forming," Rodriguez said urgently, monitoring a specialized display that captured the interface's output. "But it needs to be transmitted through the activation terminal." She moved to a wall panel, entering a sequence that caused a section of the room to reconfigure, revealing a concealed console. The genetic activation terminal rose from the floor, an elegant construct of advanced technology with a central, crystalline receptor designed to receive data from the neural interface. "Eleanor's final creation," Rodriguez explained, quickly initializing the system. "Linked to transmitters at critical ecological nodes worldwide. The terminal's display illuminated, showing a global map with dozens of points glowing at strategic locations, river deltas, forest cores, ocean convergence zones, Arctic ice fields. The interface is capturing the activation pattern." Rodriguez continued, watching the readings. "But Marion's letter was right. The system is awaiting a second confirmation signal." "The choice." Emma looked down at her daughter, tiny eyes now open, gazing with impossible focus. Through the interface, Emma sensed something extraordinary. Her child was aware, not with adult consciousness, but with a primal understanding beyond normal newborn capability. "She knows," Emma whispered. "The adaptive genes have enhanced her consciousness at birth." The delivery room door shuddered under a powerful impact. Metal groaned as specialized equipment began cutting through the reinforcement. "We're out of time," Rodriguez said, moving to a defensive position with what appeared to be a non-lethal restraint weapon. "The interface has captured the pattern, but without the confirmation." "It's not your confirmation to give," came a familiar voice as the door finally breached. Dr. Lillian Chen entered first, flanked by security personnel in advanced protective gear. She looked older than in their video communication, her face lined with the weight of decades dedicated to the project. "Step away from the activation terminal," Lillian commanded Rodriguez. "This isn't your decision to make, nor yours," Rodriguez countered, weapon raised. Lillian's gaze fixed on Emma and the newborn, her expression softening momentarily. "The third generation, finally." She approached slowly, hands visible to show she wasn't an immediate threat. "Emma, you don't understand what's at stake. The activation sequence must be properly controlled, deployed strategically to preserve critical resources." "For who?" Emma challenged, cradling her daughter protectively. "Your selected survivors, while the rest of humanity suffers." "For everyone eventually," Lillian insisted. "But immediate worldwide deployment would cause economic collapse, infrastructure failure, chaos, because it would undermine the power structures built to profit from ecological disaster," Emma countered, recalling Marion's letter. The neural interface continued its complex dance of light, maintaining the connection between mother and child as the activation pattern held in stasis. awaiting the final signal. Eleanor understood the need for controlled deployment, Lillian continued. That's why the system requires authorized release through secured channels. No, Emma replied with sudden certainty. Eleanor understood the need for conscious choice, not controlled deployment. That's why the system requires my daughter's consent, facilitated through our connection. Through the interface, Emma sensed her daughter's awareness focusing, responding to the situation with impossible comprehension. A question formed, not in words but in pure intention, transmitted through their genetic bond. Release the pattern everywhere, simultaneously. Or withhold? In that moment, Emma understood Eleanor's true brilliance. The choice wasn't meant for project leaders or even for Emma herself. It was designed for the third generation, the culmination of the adaptive sequence, born with the innate wisdom to decide humanity's relationship with the natural world. The choice is hers, Emma said firmly, as Eleanor intended. The security team moved forward at Lillian's gesture, but Rodriguez intercepted them, creating momentary chaos. In that brief window, Emma closed her eyes, focusing entirely on the connection with her daughter. Through the interface, Emma conveyed everything: the planet's condition, the competing visions for its future, the potential consequences of both choices, not with words or images, but through the genetic resonance that Eleanor had discovered and enhanced across 3 generations. The baby's tiny hand grasped Emma's finger with surprising strength. Through their connection, Emma felt her daughter's response, a surge of pure, decisive intention that flowed through their joined consciousness into the neural interface. The choice was made. The genetic activation terminal pulsed with blinding light as the neural interface transmitted the child's decision. Data streams flowed through the crystalline receptor, converting the complex neurological pattern into a signal that spread outward to the global network of transmission stations. Lillian lunged forward, attempting to abort the process, but it was already beyond interference. The terminal's display showed transmission confirmations appearing across the world map, each node activating in sequence, creating a cascade of connection points that soon covered every major ecosystem. "What have you done?" Lillian whispered, her voice a mixture of awe and horror as the security team stood frozen, witnessing something beyond their protocols. Emma felt the neural interface gently disengage as its purpose was fulfilled. She cradled her daughter close, the infant now sleeping peacefully against her chest. She chose healing over control, Emma replied simply. As Eleanor intended, Rodriguez moved to the terminal's monitoring systems, studying the incoming data with scientific precision despite the charged atmosphere. The adaptive sequence is propagating through environmental systems exactly as Eleanor predicted. Plant and microbial responses already registering at primary nodes. "You don't understand the consequences," Lillian insisted, though her authoritative demeanor had crumbled. "Economic systems will collapse. Power structures will fail, and new ones will emerge," Emma countered. "Ones built on regeneration rather than extraction." The facility's remaining systems suddenly activated, emergency protocols disengaging as power returned. External monitoring screens showed the storm that had raged for days finally breaking, sunlight penetrating the clouds for the first time in weeks. 3 months later, Emma stood on the cabin porch, her daughter sleeping peacefully in a sling across her chest. The mountain landscape had transformed. Areas devastated by the landslide now flourished with unprecedented growth. Plants reclaiming disturbed earth with remarkable efficiency. Rodriguez approached from the research station they'd established in the former bunker, carrying something carefully in her hands. "First soil samples from the Sahel region," she announced, showing Emma a small container where a tiny seedling pushed through previously barren ground. The adaptive sequence continues to spread. Degraded ecosystems are responding faster than our most optimistic projections. Emma touched the delicate green shoot gently. "Any word from Lillian?" "Still coordinating the Transition Council," Rodriguez replied. For someone who fought so hard against widespread deployment, she's remarkably effective at helping systems adapt to the changes. Emma smiled. She always believed in the project's mission, just disagreed about implementation. Some control is necessary during the transition. Her daughter stirred, tiny eyes opening to study the seedling with that same impossible focus. Through their continuing bond, weakened without the interface but still present, Emma sensed her awareness, her connection to the unfolding process of renewal. Eleanor would be proud, Rodriguez said, gazing at the child. 3 generations to create the key that unlocked nature's resilience. Emma looked toward the ridge, where the hidden network of sanctuaries continued their work, monitoring and supporting the global transformation. Former project scientists worked alongside defectors now, their shared knowledge directed toward facilitating rather than controlling the adaptive sequence. She won't be the last 3rd-generation child, Emma noted. Others will come carrying the sequence forward. Rodriguez nodded. A new kind of human, not separate from nature but more deeply connected to it. The baby reached out, tiny fingers touching the seedling with gentle curiosity. Through their bond, Emma felt her daughter's contentment, not with thoughts or words, but with this simple, profound recognition of kinship with the renewing world around her. Emma cradled her child closer, watching the sunset illuminate a landscape in the early stages of healing. Not a perfect world, not a solved crisis, but a planet turning toward recovery, with humans as participants rather than merely survivors or destroyers. A new beginning, rooted in the wisdom of 3 generations.